In a city where tension often simmers beneath the surface, a routine traffic stop takes a shocking turn. Officer Jenny Thompson and her partner, Tom Stevens, are patrolling when Tom's biases prompt him to pull over a black woman driving a sleek sedan. What begins as a routine check quickly escalates into a confrontation that reveals deeper issues of racism and abuse of power. Elaine Davis, the driver, faces aggressive questioning and a false accusation that leads to a dramatic and unsettling scene. Jenny, caught between her partner's hostility and Elaine's pleas for justice, finds herself in a moral dilemma that could change everything. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Officer Jenny Thompson and her partner, Tom Stevens, cruise through the city in their police car, the engine humming steadily beneath the tense silence between them. It had been like this for weeks now, ever since the police department had undergone significant changes. Tom, a grizzled veteran of the force, had been vocal in his displeasure with the new leadership, and today was no different. "Can you believe they put one of them in charge?" Tom spat out, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the steering wheel. His voice seethed with frustration. "This department's going to hell, mark my words." Jenny shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She had only been on the force for a few months, and though she knew Tom's views weren't shared by everyone, they still rattled her. It was one thing to hear whispers about prejudice, but another to experience it firsthand from a colleague. She cleared her throat, trying to offer a measured response. "Maybe we should give the new captain a chance," she said quietly, her voice uncertain but hopeful. Tom shot her a withering look, his lips curling into a sneer. "You're too green to get it. They're all the same. Can't trust them." Jenny didn't respond, choosing instead to gaze out the window, hoping the conversation would end. They were driving down Main Street when a sleek black sedan passed by, moving smoothly through the traffic. It caught Tom's attention immediately. The driver, a black woman dressed sharply in business attire, appeared calm and composed, following all the traffic rules, but Tom's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Look at that," he muttered darkly. "No way someone like her owns a car like that. Must stolen it." Jenny's stomach dropped. She had heard this kind of talk before, but it was different now that she was in the patrol car. "Tom, we don't have any reason to stop her," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "She's not breaking any laws." Tom ignored her, flipping on the patrol car's lights. "Time for a little routine check," he said, grinning as if he was about to prove a point. The black sedan pulled over smoothly, the driver seemingly aware that resisting would only make things worse. Jenny noticed the woman's posture stiffen as they approached, her hands gripping the steering wheel just a little too tightly. Tom got out of the car with a swagger, his amusement clear on his face. Jenny followed, her nerves growing with every step. "Tom, this doesn't feel right," she whispered, a plea hidden beneath her professional tone. But Tom, as usual, didn't care. He strolled up to the driver's side window, and Jenny saw the woman's eyes flicker nervously between them. Despite her calm exterior, there was a tension in the air that made Jenny's heart race. The window rolled down slowly, revealing the well-dressed woman inside. Her expression was neutral, but Jenny could see the fear in her eyes. She had seen that look before, the one that came with being unjustly targeted. "Is there a problem, officers?" the woman asked, her voice calm but firm. "License and registration," Tom snapped, his tone laced with contempt. The woman handed over her documents, her hands trembling slightly as she passed them through the window. Tom barely glanced at the paperwork before his eyes narrowed again. "Elaine Davis," he read out loud, pausing to let her name hang in the air as if it carried some hidden meaning. "What brings you to this neighborhood, Ms. Davis?" he asked, the accusation thinly veiled beneath his words. Elaine's face remained composed, though her eyes hardened. "I'm on my way to a meeting," she responded coolly. "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" The question lingered in the air. Tom's eyes narrowed with an air of authority. "We're the ones who ask the questions around here. Get out of the car." Elaine reached for her seatbelt, her right hand hovering over the buckle, but before she could undo it, the driver's door was yanked open with brutal force. Tom grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her out of the car with such strength that the seatbelt snagged on her, and she nearly lost her balance. Her body lurched forward, and she stumbled against the side of the car, managing to catch herself just as her belongings tumbled onto the pavement. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. "Hey," she cried out, her voice a mixture of surprise and frustration as she struggled to regain her footing. That was completely unnecessary. Jenny, standing beside her partner, watched in stunned silence. The sudden aggression from Tom left her momentarily frozen, her mind racing to process what had just happened. Her partner's unwarranted hostility shocked her. But instinct kicked in. She stepped forward, her voice shaky but filled with resolve. "Sir, that wasn't called for," Jenny said, her tone firm despite the nerves beneath her words. She was complying. Tom barely spared her a glance, his expression filled with derision. "You're not about to give me trouble, are you? Stay out of this, probationary. These people are real criminals. I know how to handle them." Elaine straightened, brushing off the wrinkles in her jacket as her eyes hardened. She glared at Tom, her chest rising and falling with the remnants of her indignation. "You have no right to treat me like a suspect," she said, her voice steady but edged with anger. "I haven't done anything wrong." Tom ignored her, crouching to rifle through her spilled belongings with complete disregard for her privacy. Personal items were strewn across the pavement, and onlookers began to gather. Some passersby hesitated, while others immediately pulled out their phones, recording the scene that was quickly escalating. Jenny felt a wave of discomfort knotting in her stomach. Tom's actions were a clear violation of protocol, but his rank and attitude made her hesitate. Summoning her courage, she stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his shoulder in an attempt to de-escalate. "Officer Stevens, this isn't procedure," she said quietly but firmly. "We need probable cause to search her belongings." Tom jerked his shoulder away from her touch, his face reddening with anger. His voice dripped with condescension as he barked at her. "Probable cause? A fancy car and a nasty attitude are all the causes I need. You need to remember who's in charge here." Elaine took a deep breath, steadying herself, though her heart pounded in her chest. Despite the tension, she refused to back down. "I demand to know why I'm being treated like this. This is harassment." Tom turned his gaze back toward her, his voice low and menacing. "You don't get to demand anything. If you don't want things to get worse, I suggest you keep your mouth shut." The crowd that had gathered murmured in disapproval, the atmosphere heavy with unease. Tension buzzed in the air, and Jenny's pulse quickened. She knew this was wrong, deeply wrong, but didn't know how to intervene without making things worse. As Tom's eyes swept over Elaine's car like a predator sizing up its prey, Jenny frantically tried to think of a way to de-escalate the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. Unbeknownst to them, this routine traffic stop was about to change all of their lives forever. Tom circled the car, his eyes scanning it with the predatory gaze of someone waiting for the slightest excuse to pounce. His lips curled into a sneer as he locked his gaze on Elaine. "Nice car you've got here, Mrs. Davis," Tom said, his tone dripping with disdain. "How does someone like you afford something like this?" Elaine, refusing to let her composure slip, took a deep breath. "I work hard for my money, officer. I'm on my way to an important meeting. Can you please explain why I was stopped?" Tom's face contorted with contempt, and without warning, he slammed his hand onto the hood of her car, the sound reverberating through the tense silence. "Someone like you," Tom growled, his voice rough and full of disdain. "What do you think you're special for? Is it the fancy car or the expensive clothes? Do you think that makes you somebody? Let me guess you're one of those diversities, right? Just a quota to fill, so they can pat themselves on the back." Elaine felt her heart rate spike, but she couldn't afford to lose her composure. She had to stay calm, no matter how much venom laced his words. "Officer," she said, her voice steady though her insides churned, "I don't understand what you're implying, but I'd appreciate it if you conducted yourself professionally." Tom's lips twisted into an ugly, condescending grin. "Professionally," he spat. "You don't get to lecture me on professionalism. People like you show up here with your nice clothes, your smiles, acting like everything's fine, like you belong. But I see right through you. It's all an act." Jenny, standing a few steps away, watched the confrontation unfold, feeling a wave of nausea rise in her stomach. This was no longer just about a routine traffic stop. It had escalated into something far more dangerous, a confrontation tinged with the darkest undercurrents of bias. Jenny knew the situation was spiraling, and if she didn't act soon, it could get much worse. Summoning her courage, she stepped forward. "Sir, that's enough," Jenny said, her voice firm but calm. "The lady's been nothing but cooperative. There's no need for this to go any further." Tom whipped his head around to glare at Jenny, his eyes narrowing in contempt. "I don't need you to lecture me, rookie. Do you think you've got this figured out? think you're some kind of hero now, do you?" Elaine sensed how the situation was slipping further out of control. The rising hostility in Tom's voice, his body language, the way his hand hovered too close to his holster, it was a recipe for disaster. She had to defuse it, but without losing her sense of authority. Keeping her voice steady, she addressed him again. "Officer, I'm not a criminal. I'm just on my way to an appointment. Can we please end this?" Tom sneered, leaning in closer, his tone dripping with menace. "You think you're untouchable because you've got money, because you've got some high-end car. Out here, just another black face. And you'll learn real quick that doesn't give you any special privileges." The tension was suffocating. Jenny's pulse quickened, and she knew if she didn't act soon, this could explode into violence. But before she could speak again, Tom took another step toward Elaine, his hand brushing against his holster, as if daring her to push back, to make even the smallest wrong move. Time seemed to slow, the air between them thick with impending danger. "Mind if we take a look inside your car?" Tom asked, his voice low but threatening. Elaine stood her ground, her voice unwavering despite the fear gnawing at her. "I do mind. I haven't done anything wrong, and I don't consent to a search." Tom's face darkened, his expression shifting from arrogance to fury. His jaw clenched, and his eyes blazed with anger. "So what? You've got something to hide?" Without waiting for her answer, Tom reached out and flung open the car door, his movements sudden and violent. He began rummaging through her belongings as if searching for something, anything to justify his actions. Elaine stepped forward, ready to protest, but Jenny quickly moved between them, her body a protective barrier. "That's enough," Jenny said, her voice louder now, more insistent. She couldn't let this escalate any further. "Sir, please step back." Jenny's voice wavered slightly as she tried to maintain her composure, watching Officer Tom comb through the car. Her gut told her something wasn't right. The street was quiet, the kind of stillness that made every movement feel louder, more deliberate. Tom, however, seemed entirely at ease as he continued his search, his face impassive. Jenny kept a close eye on him, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Then it happened. A subtle movement caught the edge of Jenny's vision, Tom reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a small bag of white powder. Without hesitation, he quickly slid it under the driver's seat, his action swift and practiced, as though this wasn't the first time he had done something like this. Jenny's breath caught in her throat, her body going cold as she realized what was happening. This wasn't just an overzealous stop or even racial profiling. This was a deliberate setup, a frame-up right before her eyes. Her mind raced. How could she stop this? What should she do? Training told her to follow protocol, to support her partner, but her conscience was screaming at her to act, to intervene. Her pulse quickened, her fingers growing clammy as she stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Well, Tom finally announced, standing up with the bag pinched between his fingers like a trophy. His voice was dripping with smug satisfaction. "What do we have here?" he said, dangling the bag in front of him as if it were the ultimate evidence of a crime. His tone was full of false triumph, and Jenny could feel the bile rising in her throat. Elaine, standing just a few feet away, stared at Tom in disbelief. Her eyes widened as the reality of the situation set in. "That's not mine," she said, her voice sharp and laced with indignation. Her gaze flickered from Tom to the bag and back again, her mind struggling to make sense of what had just happened. "You just planted that," she said, louder this time, her words more forceful, carrying the weight of someone who knew they were being wronged. Tom's smirk only deepened a cold, detached expression that sent a chill down Jenny's spine. "Looks like we've got ourselves a drug dealer," he said casually, pulling out his handcuffs as if this were just another routine arrest. "You're under arrest," he added, his words sharp and final, as though Elaine's fate was already sealed. Elaine's breath quickened as she took a step back, her eyes flashing with a mix of fear and fury. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice rising. "I'm telling you, that's not mine." She glanced around, her desperation palpable, searching for someone to back her up, someone to help her. Her gaze landed on Jenny, who stood a few feet away, watching everything unfold. Jenny felt her stomach churn with a deep sense of dread. She knew what she was witnessing was wrong and unforgivable abuse of power, and she was a part of it, standing by as an accomplice. Her father's words echoed in her mind, the lessons he had taught her about justice, fairness, and the true role of an officer. A true officer works for the safety of all people. It doesn't matter their skin color. But standing here now, seeing Elaine's pleading eyes, Jenny felt paralyzed, caught between the weight of her badge and the moral imperative pounding in her chest. Elaine's voice, sharp and pleading, broke through Jenny's thoughts. "Officer," she called out, her eyes locked on Jenny's. "You were here. You saw it. You know what he did. Please, tell him this is wrong." The desperation in her voice was heart-wrenching, but before Jenny could respond, Tom turned on her. His face was red with anger, his eyes narrow and filled with barely contained fury. "You better watch yourself, rookie," he growled, his voice low and threatening. "This is how we clean up the streets. This is how we do the job." His gaze bore into her, daring her to challenge him to speak up. For a moment, the air between them was thick with tension, a silent standoff. Jenny could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her palms slick with sweat. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She knew the consequences of speaking out, of going against her partner, but the weight of what was happening, the blatant injustice, was suffocating. Before she could act, Elaine took a step forward. Her voice shook with emotion, but there was a fire in her eyes, a determination not to be silenced. "You are harassing me because of my skin color," she yelled, her voice rising with each word. "You know exactly what you're doing." Her accusation hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down, daring Tom to deny the truth. Tom's face twisted with rage. In an instant, he closed the distance between them, towering over Elaine with an imposing menace. "You think you can pull the race card and get out of this?" He spat, his voice thick with disdain. "Out here, I'm the law, and you're just another suspect. Another problem in the wrong place at the wrong time." His words were cold, meant to intimidate and belittle. Elaine stood her ground, her hands trembling but her gaze unwavering. "I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I know my rights," she shot back, her voice fierce with conviction. "You're the one breaking the law, not me." She stared him down, her defiance unshaken despite the danger she was in. Tom, visibly seething, grabbed her arm roughly, yanking her toward him. "You'll pay for this," he hissed, his grip tightening painfully on her arm. Jenny's heart raced as she watched the confrontation escalate, her pulse pounding in her ears. She could see the fear in Elaine's eyes, but there was strength there too, a strength Jenny couldn't ignore any longer. Elaine's voice, though shaky, didn't waver. "You're not above the law," she said, staring Tom down with fierce determination. "And you won't get away with this." Tom's knuckles whitened as his grip on Elaine grew tighter, his jaw clenched in barely contained rage. For a brief, terrifying moment, Jenny thought he might hit her. His anger was palpable, the veins on his forehead bulging with the effort of holding himself back. Jenny couldn't stay silent any longer. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she stepped between them, placing herself directly in front of Tom. "That's enough, Officer Stevens," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear swirling inside her. "Let her go." Tom's eyes flickered with disbelief and rage as he stared down at her. His voice was low and dangerous as he spoke. "You're siding with her," he snarled. "You think she's innocent because she can string a few sentences together? She's just another." His voice trailed off, but the hate in his tone was unmistakable. Jenny met his gaze, her heart pounding, but she stood her ground. "Let her go," she repeated, her voice unwavering. She knew she was crossing the line, but she also knew she couldn't live with herself if she didn't. The air between them crackled with tension as they stared each other down, the weight of the moment hanging over them. Jenny stood frozen, a whirlwind of emotions racing through her mind. The weight of what was happening pressed down on her, a struggle between her loyalty to her partner, the ingrained respect for hierarchy, and the deep moral compass guiding her actions. She knew that whatever decision she made now would not only affect this moment but her entire career, her future, and perhaps even her life. Tom's actions had taken an alarming turn. As he reached for his handcuffs to restrain Elaine, Jenny's heart pounded in her chest. The world around her seemed to blur as flashes of her past swam through her mind, her father beaming with pride at her police academy graduation, her mother's encouraging words to always stand up for what was right, and the promise she had made to herself to honor the badge with integrity and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. She knew this wasn't just a routine stop anymore, this was an act of abuse, and she was watching it unfold before her eyes. In a voice that trembled at first but grew firm, Jenny spoke up. "No, don't do it. Please, Tom, stop. If you are still watching this video, and find these stories useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Her words carried the weight of a plea, though her tone had an underlying authority. Tom paused, his hand hovering inches from Elaine's wrist. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing with confusion and anger. "What did you just say, rookie?" His voice was low, menacing. Jenny stood her ground, even though her hands were shaking. "I said stop, Officer Tom. This isn't right, and deep down, you know it." Tom's face twisted in rage. His career had been built on brute force and intimidation, and this challenge from a young officer was an insult he couldn't ignore. "You think you know better than me, kid? I've been on this force longer than you've been alive. Since when did you get to play morality police?" "Maybe I don't have your experience," Jenny shot back, her voice stronger now, "but I know what I saw. You planted that evidence. This woman is innocent." Elaine, who had been watching silently, her fear palpable but her dignity intact, perked up slightly. There was a glimmer of hope in her eyes now, though she remained cautious. She didn't want to provoke Tom further, but the situation was spiraling out of control. She sat still, trying to avoid making things worse. Tom's eyes flashed with fury. He stepped closer to Jenny, his voice dropping to a venomous growl. "Listen here, kid, I can end your career with one phone call. Do you want to throw everything away for someone like her? Is that really what you want?" For a moment, Jenny hesitated. She thought about everything she had worked for, the long hours of training, the sacrifices her family had made, and the dream of making a difference from within the system. Could she risk losing it all? Her future flashed before her, hanging by a thread. But then she looked at Elaine, her face pale with fear, her eyes silently pleading. Jenny knew this woman's life could be torn apart in the next few minutes, and if she didn't intervene, Elaine would be just another victim of systemic injustice. "If standing up for what's right means losing my job," Jenny finally said, her voice steady, "then so be it. I won't be part of this." Tom's face turned beet red. His jaw clenched, and he stepped even closer, jabbing his finger into her chest. "You're done, you hear me? Done. I'll make sure you never work in this department or any department again." But to his surprise, Jenny didn't flinch. She held his gaze unshaken. "Do whatever you need to, Tom, but you're not arresting this woman on false charges, and I'm not moving." The tension between the two officers hung thick in the air, as if the very atmosphere was waiting for someone to make the next move. Jenny's heart was pounding, but she kept her expression calm, determined not to show fear. Elaine watched, her eyes darting between the two, her breathing heavy. For a moment, it seemed like the situation might de-escalate. Then, Elaine spoke up. "Officers, please," she said cautiously, her voice composed but pleading. "There's no need for this to go any further. We can resolve this peacefully." Tom's head whipped around, his face contorting in rage. "Shut up," he barked. "You don't get to talk." Before anyone could react, Tom lunged toward Elaine. His words came out in a low, dangerous snarl. "You think you can run the show here? Let me tell you something, you're nothing out here. Do you think your color gives you privilege? Out here, you're just another target." With a sudden burst of aggression, Tom shoved Elaine against the side of her car. She stumbled, the impact knocking the breath out of her as her back hit the door with a hard thud. The force dazed her for a moment, but as she regained her composure, the shock quickly turned to anger. She breathed heavily, trying to steady herself, her eyes burning with fury. "You can't do this," she said, her voice filled with defiance. Elaine stood up straight, her shoulders squared. She wasn't about to back down now. Jenny's heart raced faster. She knew that what happened next could change everything for her, for Elaine, and for Tom. It was a pivotal moment, and the line between justice and corruption was about to be drawn. Elaine gasped, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and indignation. "This is illegal." Tom's eyes, blazing with unchecked anger, loomed menacingly over her. "Illegal," he scoffed, his tone dripping with mockery. "You don't even know the meaning of the word. Do you think your nice clothes and fancy car make you untouchable? I'm here to remind you that you're not." His voice was low and threatening, his intentions clear. This wasn't about law enforcement anymore, it was personal. Jenny sat frozen in place, her heart racing faster than it ever had in the line of duty. This had shifted beyond the realm of authority and procedure. It was about Tom's rage, his deep-seated disdain for Elaine, and an unsettling desire to humiliate her for reasons Jenny couldn't fully understand. His eyes held a viciousness that terrified her, and she knew she had to intervene before things spiraled completely out of control. Elaine, still shaken from the sudden escalation, took a moment to steady herself, but her resolve hadn't faltered. She raised her head and stared directly into Tom's eyes, unflinching despite the overwhelming tension in the air. Her voice, though quivering, carried the force of defiance. "Well, what are you going to do about it? Do you think you're above the law? You're not. No matter how much you want to be. You're just a bully in a uniform." Tom's hand hovered near his holster, his jaw clenched in fury. The implication of violence was unmistakable, as his eyes bore into hers with a dangerous intensity. "I'm the law out here, and you're about to find out just how far that power goes." Jenny's breath caught in her throat, but something inside her shifted. She could no longer watch this unfold in silence. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she stepped forward, grabbed Tom by the collar, and pulled him back. Her voice was firm, unwavering. "Enough. She has rights, and you're violating every one of them." Tom's eyes flared in disbelief as he shoved Jenny's hand aside. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, kid. Don't think I won't report this behavior." Jenny straightened her back, her mind flashing with memories of her father, a man who had always taught her to stand by her principles, no matter the cost. "I'd rather lose my job than lose my integrity." The standoff reached its boiling point. The air between them was thick with tension, and the world seemed to slow down as cars passed by, drivers and passengers craning their necks to witness the unfolding chaos. Elaine realized she had no other choice, no way out except through the truth. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. "Officer," she began, her voice calm but resolute, "I believe there are certain facts that should interest both of you." Tom sneered, a cold laugh escaping his lips. "Save it for the judge." Elaine, unfazed, continued, "I am Captain Elaine Davis, and it's my honor to serve as the new commanding officer of this precinct." Her words hung in the air for a moment, met with stunned silence. The weight of her revelation seemed to crash down all at once. Tom opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Jenny's eyes widened in shock, struggling to process the gravity of what she had just heard. "That's impossible," Tom stammered, his previous bravado quickly evaporating. Elaine moved slowly, deliberately, as she reached inside her jacket. Both officers tensed, but her only intention was to retrieve her credentials. She handed the badge to Jenny, who examined it closely before passing it to Tom. His hands trembled as he held the evidence of his catastrophic error. I didn't know," Tom muttered, his voice shaking. Elaine's eyes hardened. "Would it have made a difference if you did? Should it make a difference? Every citizen deserves equal rights in our society, regardless of their position or the color of their skin." Tom, desperate to salvage whatever dignity he had left, attempted to explain. "Look, I didn't know. I didn't mean." Elaine cut him off, her voice sharp and unyielding. "You acted out of prejudice and an abuse of authority. That's something the department will not ignore. We'll be addressing this, trust me." Jenny let out a deep sigh of relief, feeling the immediate danger lift from the situation. But she knew in her heart that this wasn't the end, it was merely the beginning. Today's events would set off a chain reaction that would force long overdue conversations about justice, reform, and integrity within the police force. As Elaine and Jenny exchanged a look of mutual understanding, it became clear that this fight for fairness and integrity was far from over. Their stand against injustice, against those who misuse their power, had only just begun. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've journeyed through some profound and eye-opening topics, and I'm grateful for your time and attention. As you reflect on what we've discussed, I'd love to hear from you. What has resonated with you the most? Please share in the comments below one key takeaway from today's content that you plan to integrate into your life. Your insights not only enrich our community but also help others find value and inspiration. If you found this video meaningful, please leave a comment and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support is crucial in helping us continue to create content that uplifts and encourages.